So, we've had a very good time so far, haven't we? I witnessed, because I was busy at the background doing some work, and I enjoyed the Reviewing Democracy in Africa. I would want to commend the panelists that did a very good job dissecting the topic. I believe that topic will still continue to be a discussion we'll have, but I'm looking beyond talk shops to, actions, to policies, to seeing that everything that was said here would actually be, executed for the benefits of all of us. If not, the next time I invite you for this program, you tell me, Emmeline, you talk too much, you don't act. That's on a lighter note. So without further ado, I know we want to keep to time. I want to call on my panelists, my able panelists. I'm well aware that Mr. Selom Adedevo is not here. He sent his apologies. So I would call, if available, Dr. Sam Ohwaboa, founder, Namath Pharmaceuticals Nigeria. Could he make it? Is he here? Please. Oh, fine gentleman. A round of applause for him. Thank you for coming. And I hope I mentioned your name well, sir. I tried. Yes, my little Nigerian in me, did justice. Okay. And then next on my list, I have Professor Muhammad Isra, President Mariam Abacha American University, Nigeria. I am told he is here. I was told earlier that he's here. Is he here? Right. We also have Mr. Wale Abu, CEO, Liquid Intelligent Technologies. Is he here, please? Round of applause for him. Thank you so much. I'm also told that Devshni Maria, the CEO for South Business Council, couldn't make it. She actually had challenges with her flight. So my able two gentlemen here are well capable of dissecting the topic. Now, it's interesting that the last section, getting towards the end, one of the panelists mentioned that we have cocoa, we have tea, but we have to go and borrow technology outside Africa to process it. And that has been one of the conversations we've had for so long, because I was speaking to some of my colleagues at lunch, and I asked, I lived in Nigeria for a very long time, so I do know that we also have schools or institutions that train in technology. Ghana also has institutions that also train in technology. So you have your tech, you have UMAT, and most of the polytechnics are well equipped for that. Yet, we still are lacking behind when it comes to industrializing our own systems. So whilst we breed the raw materials, we still have to go and borrow technical know-how or pay for technical know-how or exchange our resources for technical know-how. And then and during the exchanges, I am told that it's not a 50-50 thing, obviously. It is shared not in favor of us. So it's almost like I'm assuming a 70-30, a 60-40, should that be the case if we're going forward? But then back to the question, which I think is related. In view of all of these challenges and opportunities that we have, how would you advise African governments and organizations to actually take advantage of technology that would reflect our objective of high sustained economic growth, connectivity, and integration? So I think I would let the Dr. Ohwaboa please start, and say, yeah. Do you have a microphone, sir? Please, let's give a round of applause for him.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. That's better. I was asked to give a keynote on pathway to global emergence. What are the priorities in the fourth industrial revolution? And I start with saying that I wish to express my gratitude to God for the opportunity to be here. It's always a pleasure to return to Accra once in a while, if for nothing, to serve our Ghanaian jollof and see whether it has improved. Seriously speaking, Accra reminds me of all the efforts made over many years to preach regional and continental integration and harmonization. While I admit that much has been achieved, it is clear that much more is required. Many leaders in West Africa are yet to fully understand the benefits of ECOWAS economic integration, including the long-awaited single currency regime. They are yet to understand there is so much to gain by leveraging strength. I'm praying and hoping that the newly launched African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement will be fully consummated soon. For me, it is the critical fair chance that Nigeria and indeed West Africa has to achieve any meaningful share of global trade. Africa contributes only 2.84% to global GDP, representing the second smallest continental economy in the world after the Oceania. Yet it has a population of about 1.4 billion, which is 17% of the world population, 2.84% GDP contribution, and contributing population of going to 20%, making it the second most populated continent after Asia. This population is growing at nearly 2.5% per annum and projected to reach 2.5 billion in 2050. Over 460 million people in Africa are living in extreme poverty, which is about a third of the population. COVID-19 and its aftermath, coupled with the Russian-Ukrainian war, have forced many African nations into dire poverty, reaching 82% in South Sudan and over 50% in most of the sub-Saharan African countries, including South Africa that has 55.5% poverty rate. This level of poverty, of course, has been compounded by high levels of unemployment rate, which varies across the countries, with Nigeria reaching about 37%, South Africa 33%, Rwanda 24%, Sudan 20%. Ghana's unemployment rate that I saw at 5% is exceptional and indicates its economic performance until the headwinds hit it, causing massive devaluation and inflation. Global emergence. According to the Worldometer, China is contributing 15.12% of the global GDP, only next to the United States, which contributes 24.08%, but far ahead of Japan, 6.02%, Germany, 4.56%, India, 3.28%, UK, 3.26%, France, 3.19%, Brazil, 2.4%, Italy, 2.4%, Canada, 2.04%, and Russia, 1.95%. The above are the 11 biggest economies in the world and control global trade and global geopolitics. Africa is not represented here. India represents the Asian continent at about number 5, while Brazil represents Latin America at about number 8. The biggest African economy measured by GDP, Nigeria, is only at number 30, contributing only 0.46% of global GDP, with South Africa at number 22, Egypt at 44, Algeria at 53, Morocco at 61, Ethiopia at 66, Kenya at 67, Ghana at 74 number, contributing only 0.07% of the global GDP. Behind Ghana, the GDP contributions of the other African countries are so insignificant that they're equated to 0, such as Sierra Leone, number 155, Liberia, number 157, Burundi, number 158, Gambia, number 175, out of 190 countries in the world measured. As earlier stated, the whole of Africa contributes only 2.84% of the global GDP, which is markedly below what India alone contributes. India contributes 3.28%, and just slightly higher than what Brazil contributes, 2.54%. Can you imagine single countries contributing more than a continent? Yet, all the African countries occupy seats each in the United States, just as US and China. What are the plausible predisposing factors? The chronic underdevelopment of Africa and its poor economic performance can be blamed on 5 key factors. Number 1, colonialism, warts and all. Number 2, poor education. 3, difficult operating environment. 4, low capital attraction and retention. And then 5, poor governance. Colonialism disempowered most of the African nations, creating the dependence syndrome. It was said here, we're dependent. So sometimes we need to get permission from somebody else to do anything. When we are competing, our presidents want to compete, they go to Chatham House, even before they come to go and talk to Europe, instead of talking to their people. Poor education, which still subsists, prevented the development of properly skilled manpower that can compete. The difficult operating environment, which still persists, includes a difficult physical environment, paucity of enabling infrastructure, poor health and safety barriers, malaria, for example, and the uninviting legal or judicial structures and processes. Low capital attraction and retention derive from most of the earlier key issues, but mostly anchors on poor governance, which was, and to my mind, is still the biggest obstacle to global emergence of Africa economically. That point was emphasized by the last session. Governance is the issue. Now we're going to the fourth industrial revolution because that's where we're looking for priorities. After Africa lost big time during the first industrial revolution, which started around 1784, and the second, which began around 1817 and stretched. During the first, we were largely missing on the global map. During the second, we were still either under colonial rule or just emerging as independent nations. First industrial revolution was the water and steam era that generated the mechanical production capital that enabled mechanized production. The developed nations of Europe and America optimized this era to dominate the world. Cost of goods was high and not really accessible to Africa. The second industrial revolution started around 1870 with the discovery of electric power. This led to the mass production of goods, and Africa became a major recipient of imports. The first industrial efforts in this second revolution, especially in the north of Africa, began to emerge, and most of Africa entered late. The third industrial revolution, which started by 1969 stroke the early 70s, was ushered following the development of electronics and then its combination with information technology to automate production. United States, Japan, and China, amongst other nations, were early adopters of the third industrial revolution, which eventually metamorphosed into the digital revolution. Opportunities opened to Africa to leapfrog, but the hindrances identified above have not let Africa optimize, except for a few countries, particularly in North Africa. Right now, the world is transiting into the fourth industrial revolution, which was recognized in 2016. This is the era of fusion of technologies that is blurring the line between physical, digital, and biological spheres. This era is being characterized by 1, velocity and scope of transactions, 2, exponential evolution rather than the linear evolution of the previous era, 3, disruption of almost every industry in every country, 4, it heralds changes that transform entire systems of production, management, and governance. We cannot get into production as was being proposed by the last speaker, one of the professors, without adopting technologies, whether they are developed locally or offshore. It really consists of mobile connectivity assisted by artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, nanotechnology, biotechnology, material science, energy storage, quantum computing, and digital fabrication technologies. Many innovative systems are being designed from this technology. Newer algorithms and software to discover new drugs are currently on the offering. Engineers, designers, and architects are combining computational designs, additive manufacturing, and synthetic biology to pioneer a symbiosis between microbes, human body, the products we consume, and even the buildings we inhabit. Intelligent buildings are emerging, and mobile and transported houses are envisioned. What are the benefits? Benefits derived from this new industrial revolution are many and still evolving because of the apparently infinite possibilities. 1, it will help raise global income levels and improve the quality of lives of populations around the world, Africa inclusive. Already, as we know, ordering a car, booking flights, buying products, making payments, listening to music, watching a film, or playing a game can all now be done remotely, and sometimes even using robots, reducing costs and increasing convenience. There is expected to be a supply-side miracle with long-term gains, efficiency and productivity, drop in transportation and communication costs. Logistics and global supply chains will become more effective, and the cost of trade will drop, resulting in open markets and economic growth, imminent overtaking of capital. Overtaking of capital. Please, this is where I'm going to focus as I begin to conclude. Imminent overtaking of capital by talent as the critical factor of production. Low skill, low pay. High skill, high pay dichotomy. Businesses will move from more digitization, which is the third revolution, to innovation based on the combination of technologies, which is the fourth revolution, to meet new customer expectations, achieve product enhancement in spectacular ways. Collaborative innovation and organizational reforming will enhance cross-border transactions at minimal cost. As physical, digital, and biological worlds continue to converge in the fourth industrial revolution, new technologies and platforms will enable citizens to engage and interrogate governments and political leaders more intensively. Greater challenges will emerge in terms of control of digital infrastructure and the need to have enhanced surveillance systems over cyberspace to prevent possible cyber warfare. Now, the pathway and priorities for global emergence, I identify 6 of them. Number 1 is good governance. Good governance. Africa badly needs a new crop of leaders who are enlightened, visionary, capable, competent, and with the highest level of integrity. The continent has suffered terribly because of the chronic deficit of stock of good leaders. The greatest priority of Africa, as we aim to claim a respectable place in this emergent fourth industrial revolution, is to digitalize our political leadership selection paradigm. Borrowing from the Nigerian experience, we must find ways to exercise the following demons: monetization of political selection by parties, vote buying by the candidates, rogue electoral system and umpire, and money for justice judicial system. The second is revolutionize educational systems. The colonial acquired educational system that prepares students for employment must change to the experiential learning system that prepares them as entrepreneurs, innovators, jobs, and wealth creators. African nations can turn the current disadvantage of a large young population of uneducated or poorly educated youth by deciding to create skilled manpower with talent. This talent is required all over the globe to power the fourth industrial revolution. Luckily, the digital infrastructure and cost needed to mass produce skilled manpower is affordable to most African nations. Less than 50% of the current aid they receive, if invested in this kind of education, will create a revolution to grow our GDP and make us relevant in the global economy. The third is focus on investment drive. Concomitant with the educational revolution will be a decided focus on investment drive. Africa must deliberately make itself investment friendly. Countries that want to attract investment must do the following as a minimum: tackle insecurity decisively and create a safe business environment. Enthrone and enforce law and order with grim determination. De-escalate corruption by adopting transparency in every government transaction. Use digital frameworks and platforms to conduct all businesses in the nation, excluding national security issues. Dispense justice quickly and fairly. Adopt stable investment promotive policies across the board. Validate every new policy of government and action on the impact on investment attraction, whether it is domestic or foreign. Offer irresistible incentives to domestic and foreign investors and maintain the highest level of integrity in dealing with investors. The fifth, and I have 6, the fifth, optimize other natural endowments. In addition to abundant human resources, Africa is blessed with excellent agricultural potentials and mineral resources, solid, liquid, and gaseous. It's really a tragedy that a continent blessed with gold, diamond, lithium, crude oil, and hydrocarbon-based gases will harbor such a high mass of poor people. African leaders have failed to exploit these natural resources for the good of their citizens. Indeed, the inappropriate and corrupt exploitation of these minerals have led to wars, as you see in DRC, or banditry, as you find in certain parts of Nigeria. What is called for is to attract investment into these areas through open and competitive bids for mining concessions and open, transparent accounting for the sales of the output, be it oil, gas, or bauxite. The last is continuous investment in research and development. To sustain competitiveness in this age, research and development must complement the educational revolution. This is the area of human talent optimization, using existing material to create new phenomena. So 24/7 experimentation will be required. Academic research will be supplanted or substituted by industrial and applied research. Both the public and private sectors must invest in R&D as a creed so that African nations can be in the forefront of the revolutions, where human capital becomes more important than financial capital. First mover advantage is essential in the ensuing global environment. In addition to building a crop of skilled and high-powered manpower, the whole society must be moved to adopt new values that will enable Africa sustain the anticipated gains from the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Military men must learn to stay to their duties and stop interfering in political governance. The political class must be reoriented to know that political leadership is service and sacrifice, not for self or specific groups. Criminals, infidels, ex-convicts, pedophiles, drug peddlers, money launderers, and men of low morality must be excluded from political office. Leaders must lead by example. Parents, teachers, public and civil servants, businessmen and traders must all operate within their codes, and any deviation must be corrected firmly. Conclusion, because the lady is just almost trying to push me out. Yeah, I was asked to give, actually I was given 30 minutes. That's when the letter that sent to me, but I compressed it. It may be difficult for Africa to compete in military and defense technology and wares. It may be difficult for African nations to determine decisions in the United Nations as they do not have veto rights. Africa may never have the financial power of the developed nations or the developed countries, the G7, G21. We may not even belong to NATO or have any strong defense pact, but we have human beings who can be turned into human talent and human capital. This is the most important substrate for competing in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Let Europe and America develop the hardware, but let's prioritize in developing the software. And there is great chance that we can bridge most of the gaps within the generation. Thank you, and God bless you.
Please, you can do better than that. Better, better. That's good. Dr. Sam Ohuabowa, right? I got it well? Yes, thank you so much for that insightful presentation. I sat down there and as I was giving the statistics of the continent of Africa compared to countries, is it not becoming the norm that Africa is similarly becoming a country when you are describing the continent? So, when we speak about Europe, we are very specific about what part of Europe we're talking about. But when it comes to Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, everybody is African. No wonder the Moroccans want to move to the UAE. Do you blame them? Yes. There was an uproar when the last World Cup, and they gave glory to God and the Emirates, and they didn't mind Africa, and Africans were upset. Anyway, he's touched on a lot of things that the panel is supposed to deal with. So I think that we're just going to go around it. There's no need to belabor the issue. But let's hear from Mr. Wole Abu what his opinions are. When we're talking about deploying technology, he spoke beyond technology. I think he broke down the sectors that would need to be tackled and how serious we need to be to, join the revolution. In your view, how can technology play its part in ensuring that government is able to ensure high sustained economic growth, connectivity, and integration? I think it should be on.
So thank you very much. And thank you, Mazi, for enlightening us this afternoon. So Africa is forged by fire. So let's first realize that the strongest steel is forged by the hottest fire. So we are very strong people and very flexible. All across the world, Africans are doing great things. So I think the narrative someone had mentioned before about the bias of the Western press in underreporting the good things that happen here. So we will not validate some of those things. So let's focus on your question, which is what can we do? I won't repeat the keynote address. I agree with everything he said. However, when we're looking at a society, I think we can broaden our view about what development is. Development comes about when you consider what some people call the triple helix, which is academia, people who research, who naturally have talent for thinking and all that. Then you've got the government, the public sector, and then you've got the private sector. Each of them have their own characteristics. They have, different things to do. It is at that intersection, that sweet spot, that you can take an idea, for example, you can make a policy around it, and you can crowd in resources from the private sector. So if you apply that to technology, the first thing is that, what are our problems? Before I jump to 5G, I don't want to tell you how we got to 5G, etc. A society, the foundation of development is identity. Who are you? How many people are in this conference? Where is it going to hold? There are two things, even scientifically speaking. They will say matter occupies time and space. If I'm here, I can't be in Lagos at the same time. So here we are. We need to have an identity system. So if you're talking about Africa, that whole general thing called Africa, that 1.2 billion people in Africa, who are they? You can live in Nigeria, for example, my country, build a house, drive around till you die, nobody will know you. Because unless you're really going into structured real estate and you need to get some government paper, nobody cares. 80% of the people who live in Nigeria and in the kind of accommodation that is found everywhere around Africa, Ghana inclusive, they don't need anybody's papers before they build it. They just build their mud house or whatever, and they live there forever. They've lived there for generations. If you want to buy a car and you don't want a license, or you can forge a license, you can drive around. You can't do these things in any other part. You know why? If Nigeria is 200 million people, it's a finite number. You can count it. So the first thing is, who are you? So governance from a technology perspective comes down to the first thing is identity. You can't make a phone call without a phone number because you must be authenticated first. So the first thing our governments have failed to do is that they have not even identified the so-called people that they govern. These statistics come from somewhere else. They tell us Africa is X, Y, Z. But you, in your place, and I can give several examples. I had a friend who was going for politics, and I said, how many schools are in your place? He said he doesn't know. How many students? I don't know. Because it's not about development. If you want to develop anything, you must first know how many people. Number one, identify them. Of course, you have many layers of identity. You can now profile them properly. Anybody who's done marketing here, like my boss here, we know that you can even segment and do all that. You just don't fly, a kite and say we are X, Y, Z people. So first we are pretending, because there's no African country right now, and Africans don't have that. So this issue of cross-border trade is going to be difficult. Yeah. How are you just going to come into my house? I don't know who you are. I can't verify. And there are technologies that can do that. Blockchain is available. Everything is available. We can do that. It's relatively simple. It's ABC. People in France knew who they were in the 12th century. There's no reason why we can't do that. The second thing is that space is also finite. At least the space in Africa, we know where it starts from Algeria to Cape Town. So, the longitude and latitude system has been there since. That was actually, to me, the first industrial revolution, not the machines. They knew how to navigate, so they could get here and get back. We know that if you start to measure in kilometers, you get to one place and say it's ended. There are companies, by the way, who use artificial intelligence, who have mapped Africa. That's my area. I can tell you the companies who have mapped Africa to 1 kilometer radius. This is not the government, and they know the GDP of that area. They know the Apple, they know whether there's a school there, so they use it to do retail validation. Number one, the reason why you need to do that is property rights. The foundation of capitalism, of getting capital, is land. You must give that to people. That's where the Industrial Revolution started from. If you don't have property rights, if land belongs to a community and you don't even know who they are, then you keep having all these funny crises. You need to map the land. Those are the first two things that you should use technology to do. Who owns what, or where does this start? Map it out and know. China has done this thing ages ago. Then you can now start any kind of planning. I want to leave this place as a forest. I want to do this. I want to do that. Right now, if you go to most developing African cities, you see a planned area, then the rest. Okay? So, to me, those are the first things. Because when you have this in place, you can now say, okay, what are our problems? First problem is already been identified in the SDGs, hunger. You know, food. People are hungry because before we start talking technology, we just came from lunch. The reason we're able to have this conversation is we've had something to eat. Breakfast, break, lunch, dinner, your fridge has something, so you can worry about the economy. If you haven't eaten by 11 o'clock, you are not interested. And so for those of you who are into agric or you have a pet at home, you know, even your chicken in the morning, the first thing they want to do is eat. Your dog, they want to eat. We are similar. We are animals. We need to eat. You can't have 400 million people hungry in a place and you think you will have peace. You can't have peace.
Round of applause. That's deep.
So our technology, technology makes a good man better and a bad man worse. Technology can be used for anything. You can use a gun to protect. You can use it to rob. Technology is not 5G. Technology can be a simple pump. It can be a lever to bring water from the ground. You know, it can be the things I just said, measuring a place the way you did and keeping it somewhere in the general ledger. So first thing we need to solve, prioritize, is hunger, not climate change. First, we must eat. And to do that, you need land to produce food. Hydroponics, you still need a place, you know? For you to be able to bring in that investment, somebody must have a right to use that place for that business. One of the biggest problems SMEs have today, who create the jobs and co, is that they can't attract any capital because they don't have any legal right to some things that they need. How many farmers have a CFO? The politicians have CFO in Accra. The farmer who feeds everybody has no right to his land. Therefore, he cannot raise capital from the bank. And this is, to your first point, the first problem of colonialism. The tail end of slave trade, imperialism, colonialism has not been dealt with. Because the reason what happened in slave trade is that they just took your land. They didn't need to pay you for it. You're a slave. You have no rights. They took away your property rights. When we fought for independence, we didn't return the land back to the owners of the land. We just took over the government apparatus that was a colonial structure and continued to implement that. Whatever you implement across Africa today, people have done the studies, it's only 14% value that's retained here. Because there's a value chain when you build a structure like this. The steel rods, you don't have steel mills because you missed the Industrial Revolution. You don't have skilled labor. The design, the building, everything will come from outside. So if you spend $1 billion to put this together, 85% is going to go to Germany, Asia, anywhere you go. That's why they are rich. And that's why you are poor. So you must invert that value chain. It's better to build 1,000 houses made of mud bricks with your laborers, and they may not be as fancy as this. That way, you have 850 million retained. But, we want to copy, because there's also the mental part of colonialism. We want to build a structure, close it up entirely, it's not suited to a tropical environment. Then we have to import air conditions, which we don't make, to keep it cool and all that. So there is also a synaptic approach to how we solve our problems. So that's on food security. I'll give this before. You want an enabling environment. We all have telephones. The tele-density, at least now we all have, everybody here has a telephone. A GSM phone has 112 programmed as a GSM protocol as an emergency number. If you're setting up a network, you must program 112 on your network, that's MTN, Airtel, everybody, as emergency number. Can you call the police? Every developed country, the first time even a child, if you watch movies, there's a call 911, call this. Who do you call in Africa? Nobody. Because the police is a colonial remnant, and they feel that their job is just to arrest you, not to support you. So if somebody walked in here with a gun, now we knew he was going to commit a crime, we don't have any number to call for help. He's already there. So from a technology perspective, that technology exists, is programmed. All you need is a call center for the police or national security advisor or whoever to receive that call. So the insecurity we're talking about, half of it you can prevent just by making every telephone owner a policeman. By making, I can hide and call 112. Then we can now be dealing with response time and all that and all that. So that's security, that's food. Housing, I gave a small, we have a building code. The building code was a colonial building code that says you must build with these materials, which were imported by Lever Brothers and Co. because it was set up for their corporations. We have not updated the building code anywhere. So from a technology perspective, if you are talking 5G or anything, we need power. Power, electricity, is at the bottom. You can't do anything technology without power. So if you say you want to do 5 industrial revolution, the business case for a 4th industrial revolution rests first, after we clear property rights and co, on the fact that you can generate these things. A data center, they don't measure them by size. They measure them by how much power they consume. So you hear a 5 kilowatt, a 10 megawatt, a 20 megawatt, a 200 megawatt data center. That's why you don't have data centers in Africa now. Who's going to put his critical data here when you can't power it?
That's, wow.
So in terms of priorities, we need to prioritize the security, food, housing. Then let me use one more, clothing. If you spend $100 a year on clothes, how much value do you think is in Africa? Of the 1.2 billion people, let's look at this room, look at the value of the clothes and how much you just gave to Louis Vuitton. The only part that remains here is that labor part. And it's about time we changed it and say, you know what? Yes, the whole world can see us as laborers, cheap labor. We can't build policies that reinforce us being laborers. We must now be creators of wealth. So the skill acquisition, not certificates, I completely agree. Look, it's better to have 1,000 welders today in today's Africa, and people can use a screwdriver, than you reading. I don't want to mention a course because anybody can be here. Because those colonial education systems trains you to be a clerk, So you come out and you're waiting to clerk for someone. Let them tell you what to do. But if you can weld, somebody will need your service to weld a gate. to do something. We don't have craftsmen. Let me tell you something. How many of you can recognize lithium if you see it in the open? You can't. It's just a rock. I can show you a picture. It's just a rock. How many of you know feldspar? If you saw copper, if you even saw gold, it's the finished product that we know. Meanwhile, it's from here. Because even in your language, you are not even taught, even the plants, you don't know. It took some time. Recently, people started drinking moringa. Moringa has been around. You know, this, we call it dogoyaro, they call it neem. It's been around. They've been using it for ages. You don't even know what it's used for. You don't teach people in your school that this cures that. Meanwhile, we know. Because, so let me skip to health. How do you fix health? Yes, you have a Bupa card, so you go to the best hospitals abroad when you're sick. How do you think the ordinary African gets healed? He goes to somebody in his village who is called a doctor. They call him native doctor in my own place. Some get it right, some don't get it right, just like every other person. But you know what? Again, because of colonial mentality, we said, no, you guys are not good. Meanwhile, we can't massify Western medicine. But if these guys were just a primary healthcare center, you know, and they were certified at some level, again, this is where identity comes. If you know that in this village there are 500 people and this fellow has been using some ancient technique to set bone, all he needs is maybe some treatment on sanitation, and he will do the bone, and they do it fairly well in some areas, but they end up infecting the person because they are not trained for that. Even doctors get continuous training. You can create 1 million doctors in Accra, in Ghana, just by recognizing these people that have been left there. And I think this is where African leaders need to start saying, okay, what is our problem? How do we get there? You can't just import doctors from somewhere, and you don't have 16 years to train a doctor, you know, to get here. And when you finish training them, because of the whole world, global things now, declining population over there, high buying power, you poor, all your doctors will leave. So how do you sustain all these things? We must, like I said, even the guys who are in government, you must be creative. You want to solve the housing problem. I can tell you that if you go to the University of Ghana and you check the engineering department, I'm sure there will be 25 projects there that civil engineers have researched, building engineers have researched to get a degree, and they left it on the shelf. Because when the government wants to solve a problem, they don't look at the academia and their people and say, has this been done before? What are the thoughts around this? How do we localize it? Bring 20 ideas. Let us pass them through XYZ. Some will be funded by grants, some will be funded by the private sector because they are marketable. We don't do that. They just leave them alone. Somebody just takes a decision, and it's almost always a suboptimal decision. And
interesting.
That is, for now, let me just stop there. Thank you.
I'm sure if a round of applause. So when I was when networking, I was asking my colleagues a rhetorical question that when the AU sit down to meet, I don't know if Dr. Ruben can give me an answer to this, because I was telling him when we met about such a summit that there's so many events, but economic summits are not child's play. So when the AU people go to gather, what are they talking about? Because what they've both mentioned, now I can understand how the developed world have evolved. I can understand why there are food banks. I can understand why if you're poor, at least you can get something to eat. Because if you want the same people to think about the country and they have basic needs not met, then what are you talking about? So we all have learned a lot of things here. My problem is not that we don't know what he has said. Even though there's certain things he said, I didn't see that in perspective. We all seated here, we've come for this summit. We've been here from morning, listening to intelligent submissions till now, and there's some more coming. The responsibility, I want to ask, who does it lie on? The government, we here, whoever it is, who is supposed to take the lead? Who should bail the cat? who should follow. And if that, whoever's supposed to lead, if they're the ones here, good news. Isn't it, Dr. Brian? Isn't it? If we're not the ones here, we don't have control over they that's supposed to lead. What is the way forward? I will end with that. And if anybody has any question, they can ask. So, please.
Well, if you look at the subject, the thesis that I spoke about, I focused on governance and leadership. Because the question you asked, all of us are responsible. We constitute the country, we constitute Africa. So each person has a responsibility. But because it is the nature of man to disaggregate, people move in their direction, seeking their personal interest. And that's why you look in a company, you look for a manager to bring them together to pursue an objective, key result areas, key performance indicators. First, you set a vision. I was telling my brother here that, where is the vision? You must first set a vision where you are going as a company, as a country, as a region. And then, in setting that vision, you now develop the plans that will enable you to achieve the vision and decide who does what when. What's the role for the private sector? What's the role for the academia? What's the role for the industrial sector? What's the role for the different NGO sector, even students? A nation, Africa, needs to have a plan. And that plan can only come from it, motivated by leadership. Yeah, so both the leader and the led have responsibility, but the way things work is the leadership. If you check countries in Africa that seem to be moving forward, I think we've called a few of them here, check their leadership. The leadership has either set a vision or been able to harness people to define a destination, then motivate the people, because that's the job of leadership. They set a vision, get the strategy, get the resources, and motivate people to run with the vision. So in our own case, and I'm very, very strong on that, the person that has the problem that needs to lead, that today is the major cause, is our political leadership. And I speak in due respect. If we get our political leadership right, then our journey to emergence begins. Secondly, the other side of it is, of course, we need to have an informed and demanding followership. If leadership, the followership is demanding good governance, demanding accountability, then somehow it also forces the leadership to do what is right. So there is a need for the leadership to lead and motivate. But if they are not forthcoming, then the followership ought to take responsibility. And I'm speaking in broader terms. Because at the end of the day, everybody has his own lead. I tell my guys, I say, look, if you want a good Nigeria, start from your kitchen. Start from your classroom. Start from your unit in the company. Create that Nigeria you want. But of course, there are so much limitations if you do not have the overriding environment supportive. Otherwise, it will destroy what you have done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Round of applause, Mr. Abu. What is the way forward if you also believe that the government is the one to change, but it's not happening? He spoke about followership. What also do you have to add to that?
Okay, so here's what I think. Most times, governments follow. Most times, governments follow. You always have to pressure government. A few examples, Lee Kuan Yew, etc., where government was at the commanding height, you know. And I think Africa has even made a mistake. I think we rely too much on government. You know, it's also part of our history. We wait. We want government to do it. And because we are waiting for government to do it, nobody is doing it. But I can tell you that technology, government didn't legislate 5G, you know. You talked about innovation trumping experience now. Even the government, if they're not careful, okay, look at what's happening with social media now. Most politicians were taken aback, like in the last election, when they lost with every so-called kind of structure and tradition that they have. So technology can put in a new government, and it doesn't have to be planned, orchestrated by the current government, okay? The academia, if you have, because we're talking about leadership. Leadership, political leadership has its value, but I think it's overrated. Especially when you look at what good have they done so far? Yes, when you have a policy that supports that sector, then it can grow. But if the people in that sector are not really ready to move. So take example, telecoms. When they've been doing all kinds of stories around telecoms, no serious person came. Then MTN came because they saw a market. They had a government company with a monopoly right of where it's moribund, is dead. In fact, when we're counting telecom companies in Nigeria, people forget that it's still existing. I don't know anybody that uses their line. Okay? Those guys started innovating. They are now going into mobile money, going into all kinds of things, you know? And people are getting prosperous. To the prof who spoke earlier, they are making money. And if you're in that circle, maybe government doesn't really affect you that much.
Except the regulations.
Yes. Yes. The reason why we sometimes need government is just for that sustainability, you know, for somebody to know that, okay, if I put there are certain things you can do. For example, somebody has mapped Nigeria, okay? We don't have to wait for the government for that. Somebody has done identity system. MTN has more information on Nigerians than Nigeria. Google knows every street in Nigeria. So you are not, the government, these things are there. It's competence. We're just saying, use what is already available. If I want to go anywhere in Accra, I put on my Google map and I'm there. They have more information about Ghana than the Ghanaian army. So information open is there, which is where I think the thing is, I think is the academia, if you ask me.
Okay.
Is that will drive it, because these are thoughts. You put your children for 16 years inside an academic environment. What do they tell them? I think that our real tragedy, because you mentioned education, don't we have schools? Don't we have universities? Which policy do we need again? If the schools, the people, because you think first before you implement, then maybe somebody sees it's working, then they make it a policy. I would argue that I think the think tanks in our midst, you know, they've let us down. You have professors who have gotten accolades for cassava all over the world. We are still frying gari. Gari is something that they put, I don't know if they make it here. They process from cassava and make some kind of flour out of it and all. The way it was made 200 years ago, open head fire, wood, somebody suffering with it, that's what they're still doing till today. As an engineer, I can tell you that whole frying thing is called a rotary kiln. You can just create something and just, you know, fry it in your house. And, you know, all that income, maybe some psychedelic girls can say, I fry gari. But now, if you fry gari, by the time you finish, all your leg, you know, you can't come near the fire because they're staying next to a furnace. Why do you need government to do that? No. If the university and secondary school system decide that, okay, there's a prototype here, let's put students to kick out something, and it works, and you come to Mr. X there and say, you know what, we can sell 1,000 of these units to these people at this price. The private sector and that university will carry on. Government's job is to stay out of the way.
Okay. The round of applause.
Sorry,
sir.
My point here is, I know that for a long time, government refused to change its policy on deregulation and privatization. If they didn't deregulate and privatize, MTN wouldn't have come. If they didn't create that framework, that's where I'm going. We need government to set that agenda of deregulation, privatization, so that the private sector can then come in and government can stay by the side and just do what you call supportive role, you know, continuously looking for ways to make it easier for you. Because you saw what MTN went through at some point when government came with all manner of taxation. Those things can kill industry. That's why government remains relevant. But in terms of utilizing the policies and running, I think, is the private sector. The government makes the way, and the private sector follows. Thank you.
I'm loving the way, no, it's yours, sir.
Okay.
I'm enjoying the way their arguments are going. Are we enjoying the conversation? I'm not going to talk anymore. I want to leave this for my colleagues. Who has a question you want to ask? Please, you want to ask a question, because this is building, these questions are found on building the nation. We've heard from them that we have our roles to play. We've also heard from them that the government needs to create, the systems and framework so that we can continue. I have been arguing, by the way, that if I stand to be corrected, if this does not stop, we still will need to rely on the West, because they have the structures, they have enabling environments, and some of the talents and ideas and innovations we have here will end up continuing to be exported. And then you find most of us still migrating there and then coming only to Africa to just have a holiday. Is the continent going to turn into a tourist site for us in future? I don't know. But I keep telling people, start building global bridges, because it looks like the government is not ready for us. So that is my issue. I do appreciate what they've said, and I have taken a few cues. But think tanks, I invited think tanks here today. I want to hear from you. Do you have any question, anything to say? Yes, please. Can somebody pass the mic for me, please, quickly? Thank you.
This is quite an interesting conversation. We do understand from an economic point of view, particularly for those who subscribe to the economic principle of market liberalism, they will think that government should have no role. But I believe otherwise, because take for an example, when it comes to business, when it comes to private sector, there is no way that private sector can run when government does not establish the necessary institution that allows accreditation, regulation, and whatever it is that allows, that create the necessary conditions for those businesses to thrive. And Absolutely. You must understand also that ideology, policy, ideas all come from government. And those are all in critical determinant as to how the private sector will operate. So without government intervention in creating the necessary environment, the private sector can never thrive.
Thank you very much. That is so true. Round of applause for that. That was actually his contribution. Anybody else?
Can I
Contributions?
to
okay,
you?
yes, Mr. Abu.
So we're saying who will bail the cat. I'm not saying the government should completely, hands off. But what we're discussing here is ideas. The fountain of ideas, the crucible where you sharpen ideas, is not in government. It's in the research institution, it's in education, it's in young minds. That's where you plant this seed. So you influence government, either academia or private sector. You can start a business today and government doesn't even know it exists. They're trying to, for example, regulate technology in Nigeria today because they have no idea about what's happening there. Nobody waited for their permission before they started doing stuff. So maybe one day government wakes up and say, no, we don't want you to do that. Then the engagement starts. What we're saying is that in Africa, where do we start from? That's why I said it's from the head. The governments we have today, they are Anglophiles and Francophiles, depending on who colonized you. They're managing a broken system. I'm saying that even if you run that system 100% effectively, because of what you inherited, you are creating value outside. You are just a resource. You are just a commodity exchange. That's why you hear Africans talking about mining, as if mining is good for you. Mining is not good for you. They mine gold in my village. It's horrible. We chase them away. Because you, the villager, you have no benefit. 2% of global trade. What do you want? Why do you want to take my gold? No. You're taking my rock. You just say it's a rock. Meanwhile, it's lithium. Then you bring in gendarmes and you clear up my entire village. And that is a government policy. You know why? It's a government policy. Somehow he has gone to join one club somewhere abroad. And they tell him, why don't you give us mining rights? Is mining good for Africans?
No.
Or is good for the people who do it? We need to rethink. Mining, if you ask me, forget it. What has oil done for Nigeria? You make a few people rich, very rich. how come 130 million people are hungry? Is it so government chop the whole money? Let me tell you. In terms of infrastructure, the fiber requirement in Nigeria to put us in the fourth industrial revolution is $165 billion. If you did not steal any money from all the oil that we make, we can't fund it. So the gap we have is bigger than what they are chopping. Yes, they're corrupt, they're this and that. But we've got huge challenges that can be solved only by ourselves, not by procurement, which we tend to do now. And that's why I'm saying that the mindset will be changed by the people who educate this current generation and the next one. Give me one final example. We have an abacus, an African abacus, which is the game that they play called Ayo. It's actually a mathematical tool. Most people, even in this room, may not know that you use it to calculate, you can use it to do number bases, and that is the root of computing. Being able to do base 1, base 2, this and that. You don't know because your teachers don't even know also, and they don't appreciate that they are mathematical things. That's why we're poor at math across Africa, because we think it's a foreign concept. We don't see it in our culture. It must change in the classroom. For me, it's about changing the mindset. Use music. When I was growing up, all the music we listened to in Nigeria was Western music, because even if you had a talent, you felt that you had to play jazz to appeal to the world. But when it wasn't working, the young people just started singing their own songs. And today, Nigerian music as content is on every music platform in the world. Spotify, Apple Music, name it. And you go to Brazil, you hear Nigerian music. Was that promoted by government? Let me tell you, if government brought up a music policy, it won't work. So it must start from private people. It will be cultivate. Then the academia. There is no theater arts department across Africa today that has a chair that said this chair we want to study what made Nollywood successful, what has made Burna Boy successful, and study it in music. You know what they are still studying? Violins.
That hiss was so personal. A round of applause for them. Time will not allow us to continue. I want to respect time, but I think that I would say to the organizer of this event that I think for me, we've gotten our takeaways. We need to even start writing books on advising and teaching our young ones so that when they read such feedback from them, because even our teachers do not have access to them, Dr. Brian, what they've said, they won't find it in textbooks. So I think we have to try and, reduce this knowledge to content and try to give the young ones who we say are the future for tomorrow. I have been your moderator for this session. Thank you so much for your time. And please, a round of applause for our intelligent panelists. It's been amazing. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you. Where's my able MC? Is he in? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think Agiabudis was one of the